Ryan Whitmore slammed his resignation letter onto Victoria Harrington's desk at midnight, and she laughed. Not a cruel laugh, a broken one. The kind that escapes when a person has held too much for too long. "You think walking away solves anything?" she asked. He didn't answer. Because the real reason he was leaving had nothing to do with his career and everything to do with what he was starting to feel every time she walked into a room. He helped her find love. He built her profile. He rewrote her story. He just never planned on becoming part of it. Drop a comment with your city. Let me know how far this story has traveled. And if it moves you, subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Ryan Whitmore had not cried since the night the hospital called. 3 years. 4 months and 11 days had passed since that phone call, and he kept count. The way a soldier keeps count of everything. Not because counting helped, but because stopping felt like surrender. He remembered exactly where he stood when his phone rang. He was in a parking garage in Norfolk, Virginia, still in his Navy uniform keys. In his hand, headed home to relieve the babysitter. Emma was 2 years old and had eaten spaghetti for the first time that night. He knew that because the babysitter had texted him a photo, Emma with red sauce from her chin to her forehead, laughing like she had discovered the greatest secret in the world. And then his phone rang, and the world he had built carefully, methodically, the way he did everything came apart in the space of 40 seconds. Sarah was gone. An aneurysm. Sudden. No warning. The doctor said she likely didn't feel a thing, as if that was supposed to be a comfort to the man standing alone in a parking garage, while his 2-year-old daughter waited at home, not yet old enough to understand that the word mom would slowly lose its meaning before it ever had the chance to fully form. Ryan didn't cry in that parking garage. He drove home paid. The babysitter put Emma to bed and sat in the kitchen until 3 in the morning, staring at a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. And then he got up, and he kept going. That was Ryan Whitmore's defining characteristic, the thing his Navy brothers admired and quietly worried about in equal measure. He kept going. Through the grief, through the deployments, through the parent-teacher conferences, and the birthday parties, and the nights Emma cried for a mother she was too young to remember clearly. Through the loneliness that settled into his bones like old weather. He kept going. And somewhere along the way, without fully realizing it, he had confused surviving with living. By the time Ryan was 38, he had quietly become the kind of man people described in the same breath as words like reliable and solid and steady. His commanding officers valued him. His Navy brothers trusted him with their lives. The parents at Emma's school thought of him as that sweet single dad and occasionally brought him casseroles he never asked for. He was liked by everyone, known by almost no one. He had a daughter who was now 5 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and his stubborn jaw, who went through phases of obsessing over specific things. Last month, it had been dinosaurs this month. It was the moon, and who had recently started asking questions Ryan didn't have answers for. Daddy. Emma had said 2 weeks ago, sitting at the breakfast table with her spoon suspended over her cereal bowl, studying him with the unnerving directness that only small children possess. "Are you sad?" Ryan had looked up from his coffee. "What makes you ask that, baby?" "Because you smile, but sometimes your eyes don't." He had stared at his daughter for a long moment, this small, impossible person who had somehow inherited wisdom she had no business having at 5 years old. "I'm okay," he said. Emma had nodded slowly the way she did when she decided to accept an answer she didn't fully believe. "Okay," she said, and went back to her cereal. But the question had stayed with Ryan, following him through the day like a shadow he couldn't shake. Sometimes your eyes don't. He hadn't known until a 5-year-old pointed it out, that the grief had moved inward away from his expression, away from the surface, settling somewhere so deep inside him that he could no longer feel its edges. He had gotten so good at functioning that he had forgotten he was still carrying something. His assignment with the defense technology company Harrington Advanced Systems, known in military circles as HAS, had come through his commanding officer, Commander Dale Bishop, who had a gift for volunteer assignments that sounded optional and weren't. "It's a partnership program," Bishop had told him, sitting behind his desk with the easy authority of a man who had never second-guessed a decision in his life. The Navy is integrating some of HAS's new targeting software into fleet operations. We need someone on the liaison team. Someone sharp, organized, who knows how to work with civilians without making them feel like they're being managed. "And you thought of me," Ryan said. "I always think of you for the jobs that require someone not to screw it up," Bishop said. It was the closest thing to a compliment the man was capable of giving. So Ryan had been added to the liaison team, and 2 weeks later, he walked into the Harrington Advanced Systems building for the first time, a glass and steel tower in downtown Norfolk that felt about as warm as a submarine, and met Victoria Harrington. He had heard about her, of course. Everyone in the defense contracting world had. Victoria Harrington had built HAS from the ground up, starting with a cybersecurity division she launched at 31 with borrowed money and a reputation she was still establishing, and growing it into a company that now held contracts with 3 branches of the military and employed over 2,000 people. She had been on the cover of Forbes twice. Her TED Talk had 14 million views. She was 41 years old, precise, formidable, and according to everyone who had ever worked with her, intimidating, in a way that felt less like aggression and more like watching someone operate at a frequency most people couldn't tune into. Ryan had expected to be impressed. He had not expected to feel, within the first 10 minutes of meeting her, a bone-deep recognition, the particular wordless understanding of identifying someone else who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Their first meeting was a conference room full of Navy brass engineers and attorneys debating technical specifications with the energy of people who build by the hour. Victoria sat at the head of the table in a charcoal blazer, her dark hair pulled back with the kind of effortless precision that probably took longer than it looked, and she ran the meeting the way Ryan ran training exercises, with complete command, not a single wasted word, a quiet authority that made the room arrange itself around her attention. She caught his eye once across the table, when an attorney made a point so demonstrably wrong that the silence that followed it was almost physically uncomfortable. Ryan kept his expression neutral. Victoria's mouth twitched barely for less than a second, and she turned back to the attorney with the measured patience of someone who had spent years declining to say exactly what she was thinking. After the meeting, as people filtered out and gathered their folders, she stopped beside him. "Captain Whitmore." "Ms. Harrington, your section on the targeting accuracy data." She paused, and he had the distinct sense she was choosing her words with the same precision she brought to everything else. "It was the most clearly written document submitted in this process, and I've read 37 of them." "37's a lot of documents," he said. "I went to MIT," she said. "I read the same number of papers every semester. You learn to move fast and look for the ones that are actually saying something." She picked up her tablet. "Good day, Captain." And she walked out. Ryan stood there a moment, mildly astonished in a way he hadn't felt in years. That was how it started. Not with anything remarkable, not with a moment destined for a movie soundtrack. Just a woman walking out of a conference room after telling him his work was good, and a man standing there feeling, for reasons he couldn't immediately identify, like something had shifted slightly. The liaison work brought him into contact with her regularly. Twice a week, sometimes more, in meetings and calls, and the occasional hallway exchange when their schedules collided outside the formal structure of the partnership program. He noticed things about her the way he noticed things about everyone. Occupational habit, something that had been trained into him over years of reading people quickly and accurately. He noticed that she always had coffee but rarely finished it, that she read documents from the bottom of the page up, that she was ruthlessly efficient in group settings and noticeably quieter when the room thinned out, as if she kept a version of herself in reserve, that she wasn't quite comfortable sharing with a crowd. He noticed that her staff respected her but also moved around her carefully, like people walking near something that generated its own weather system. He noticed that she almost never laughed, and that when she did, it was quick and private, and slightly surprised, like it caught her off guard each time. He did not think about any of this in terms of attraction. He thought about it the way he thought about everything, as information, as understanding, as the quiet practice of paying attention to the world around him, because paying attention had always been how he stayed useful. He was not looking for anything. He wasn't even sure he remembered what looking felt like. Oh, the night everything changed started the way most consequential nights do, without any indication that it was going to matter. Ryan had stayed late to finish a technical review that his section needed by morning. The HS building had emptied out by 8, the office floor reduced to the hum of the HVAC system, and the distant sound of a cleaning crew 2 floors down. He was packing up his laptop in the small workspace they designated for the liaison team, when he heard something that stopped him. Not a sound exactly, more like the particular quality of silence that precedes one, the kind that exists around a person who is trying very hard to be unobtrusive. He glanced toward the end of the hall where Victoria's office occupied the corner of the building and saw that her light was still on. He almost kept walking. He told himself later that he should have, that every subsequent complication in his life could have been avoided if he had simply walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the parking garage. Instead, he walked toward the light. Her door was open 6 inches. He knocked twice on the frame. "Come in," she said, and her voice had a quality he hadn't heard before, flat, a little exhausted, stripped of the professional precision it carried in every meeting they'd shared. He pushed the door open. Victoria Harrington was sitting behind her desk in her blazer, which she had not taken off despite the hour, with her laptop open in front of her and an expression on her face that Ryan would have called, if he'd been asked to find a word for it, lost. It was such an unexpected thing to see on her face that for a moment he just stood there. "Captain Whitmore," she said, pulling herself upright in the way people do when they're recollecting that someone else is in the room. "I thought everyone had gone." "I stayed to finish the section review," he said. "Late night for you too. Always." She looked at her laptop, then back at him, and something in her expression did something complicated that he couldn't entirely read. "Do you have a moment?" He set his bag down just inside the door. "Sure." She turned her laptop around. The screen showed a dating profile partially constructed, the kind that required a photo, a bio, and a series of interest checkboxes. The profile picture she had uploaded was a photograph that Ryan recognized as her company headshot, the one on the HAS website. Professional and composed and technically perfect, and communicating in Ryan's assessment absolutely nothing about who she actually was. Her bio read, "Executive in the Defense Technology Sector. MIT graduate. Interested in travel culture and meaningful conversations." He read it twice. "What do you think?" she asked. He thought it read like a LinkedIn summary. He thought it sounded like someone describing a stranger they had only briefly met. He thought, though he couldn't have said exactly why, that it made him sad. "When's the last time you went on a date?" he asked instead. Victoria blinked. "That's not what I asked." "I know." He pulled up the chair across from her desk, the one meant for people waiting to see her, and sat down. "But context helps." She looked at him for a moment with the focused appraisal she typically reserved for technical presentations. 2 years ago, she said finally. "Give or take." "And before that?" "Why does that matter?" "Because your bio reads like you're applying for a job," he said. "And I'm trying to understand if that's a habit or just nerves." She was quiet for a long moment. "Both," she said. "Probably both." That was the first honest thing she had said to him that wasn't in a meeting context. He recognized it as such, and because he recognized it, he didn't make a thing of it. He just nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's fix it." "Yo, I don't need you to fix it," she said. "You asked what I thought. I asked for a general impression, not a reconstruction project." "The general impression is that this profile will get you dates with people who want to date your resume," Ryan said. "Which might be fine if that's what you want. But if you're doing this because you actually want to meet someone real, then..." He gestured at the screen. "This isn't going to get you there." Victoria looked at the profile. Something moved across her face that she controlled before it fully arrived. "You seem very confident about this." My commanding officer used to say that the fastest way to reach a target is to know exactly where you're starting from, Ryan said. Right now he nodded at the laptop, tells me where you want people to think you're starting from, which is different. She studied him. And where am I actually starting from? I don't know yet, he said. That's the part we'd need to figure out. Another silence. She reached for her coffee mug, found it empty, and set it back down with the expression of a person who had not truly expected to find it full. Why are you still here? She asked. It wasn't hostile. It was genuinely curious. You have your door open, and a look on your face that says you haven't talked to someone who wasn't on your payroll in about a week, Ryan said. And I've got nowhere to be until Emma's babysitter cuts me off at 10. Victoria's expression shifted. You have a daughter. Emma. She's 5. He paused. She ate spaghetti for dinner tonight, which means the babysitter is currently negotiating a ceasefire with a 5-year-old about bath time. Something changed in Victoria's face. It was small, a slight softening around the eyes, the relaxation of something she hadn't realized she was holding. How long have you been doing this, raising her alone? 3 years, he said. Little over. She stopped, started again. That's a long time to be the only one. Yeah, he said. Simple. Unadorned. She looked at him for a moment in a way that had nothing professional in it, and then she turned back to the laptop. All right, she said. What would you change? He started with the photo. This is your LinkedIn profile picture, he said. It's a good picture. It's a perfect picture, he said. That's the problem. He leaned forward slightly. When someone looks at a dating profile, they're not trying to figure out if you're competent. They already assume competent. They're trying to figure out if you're real. Whether there's a person in there they could sit across from at dinner and actually talk to. Victoria frowned. And this photo doesn't communicate that. This photo communicates that you have excellent posture and a very good photographer, he said. Do you have any photos on your phone that weren't taken for professional purposes? She looked at him like this was a trick question. Any photos where you were just somewhere, doing something you liked, and someone happened to take a picture? She picked up her phone slowly, as if approaching something she wasn't sure about, and started scrolling. He watched her face while she scrolled the small flickers of recognition as she moved through images, a brief hesitation here and there. She stopped and turned the phone toward him. It was a photo taken outdoors somewhere with green trees and soft evening light. She was sitting on what looked like a stone wall, facing slightly to the side, not quite looking at the camera. She was wearing a sweater rather than a blazer. She was smiling, not the controlled professional expression she wore in meetings, but a real one, the kind that starts in the eyes and arrives at the mouth afterward. She looked in this photo like a person who had forgotten temporarily and wonderfully to be impressive. When was this? He asked. 2 summers ago. My sister took it. We were in Vermont. She paused. It was the last real vacation I took. This, Ryan said, is the photo. Victoria looked at it. I don't look, professional, he said. Exactly. You look like someone your sister thinks is worth photographing on vacation. That's what you want, not the headshot. She was quiet for a moment, studying the image. It feels vulnerable, she said finally. Putting that out there. That's the whole point of it, he said. They went through her interests next. He asked her to tell him not to list them. There was a difference, he pointed out, between travel culture and meaningful conversations, and actually telling someone what you meant. Where have you traveled? He asked. Portugal, Japan, Argentina, Patagonia. She paused. Iceland twice. There's something about that place that I can't explain. The scale of it, maybe. The way you feel very small and very awake at the same time. Ryan looked at her. That's it, he said. That's the bio. What? That thing you just said, about Iceland. You feel very small and very awake. That tells someone something real about who you are. He nodded at the laptop. Write that down. She looked at him like he had suggested something slightly reckless. Then she turned to the keyboard. "What else?" he asked. "Old movies," she said slightly more easily now. "The kind from the 40s and 50s. I watch them when I can't sleep. Something about the pacing slower, quieter. The world wasn't in such a hurry then." "Okay." "Quiet mornings. I'm not a morning person, which is ironic because mornings are the only time I actually feel like I can think without someone needing something from me." She glanced up. "That probably sounds terrible. It sounds like someone who works too hard and needs space to breathe," Ryan said. "That's relatable." "Family dinners," she added more quietly. "My mother hosts them every Sunday when everyone can make it. I drive 2 hours for them. People think it's strange that I don't just send something or call, but—" She stopped. "But you go," Ryan said. "But I go." He didn't push on that. He understood the specific importance of showing up, the things that get communicated by presence that cannot be replicated by convenience. "Put that in," he said. "The family dinners. The driving 2 hours. The choosing to be there." He held her gaze for a moment. "That tells someone you know what matters." They worked for almost 2 hours. He asked questions. She answered them at first carefully, and then with increasing ease, like someone discovering that a room they'd been avoiding wasn't as dark as they'd expected. He found out that she had originally wanted to be an architect. That her first job out of MIT had been the hardest year of her life. That she had a dog named Ptolemy, a 3-year-old rescue greyhound who slept on her couch and had an inexplicable fear of ceiling fans. He found out that she hadn't had a close friend in years. In the way that phrase means something specific. Someone who calls because they want to, not because they need something. That the people in her life were largely divided into colleagues and family, with very little in between. He found out, without her saying it directly, that she was lonelier than she let anyone see. He recognized that particular loneliness. It was his. Somewhere in the second hour, she stopped answering his questions and started asking her own. "You said Emma's 5?" she said. "Yeah." "What's she like?" And Ryan, who talked about his daughter constantly in the abstract, found himself doing something he rarely allowed himself to do, actually showing her. The real version. Not the edited everything is fine version. He told her about Emma's dinosaur phase. About the moon phase. About the way Emma studied things, the way she went absolutely still when she was curious about something, like the rest of her body stopped, so her mind could work without interruption. He told her about the morning Emma had climbed into his bed at 6 a.m. and put her face very close to his, still half asleep, and said, "I dreamed about Mommy. She was laughing. She had nice eyes." Ryan had not told that story to anyone before. He wasn't entirely sure why he was telling it now. "I told her I thought so too," he said. "That her mommy had nice eyes." Victoria was looking at him in a way that he couldn't entirely interpret, something careful and open at the same time. "You must miss her," she said. "Every day," he said. "But—" He stopped trying to locate the right words for something he had never tried to articulate before. "It's changed. What missing her feels like. It used to feel like a door that had been blown off its hinges. Just open all the time, everything coming in at once." He paused. "Now it feels more like a room I don't go into as often. It's still there. I just don't live in it anymore." The room was very quiet. "That's a good way of putting it," Victoria said softly. "It took me a long time to find it." She nodded. Then she looked at the laptop screen, where her profile now stretched across 4 full paragraphs, specific, honest, warm, in a way the original hadn't been. The photo of her on the stone wall in Vermont was uploaded and set as primary. "This doesn't feel like me," she said. "Which part?" "All of it. It's too—" She searched for the word. "Open." "That's the part that works," Ryan said. She stared at the screen for a long moment. "What if someone reads this and thinks I don't know? What if they see all of this and decide it's too much? Then they're the wrong person," Ryan said simply. "And you'll know that faster instead of 6 months in." She looked at him. He looked at her, and for a moment, one of those moments that don't announce themselves, that only become significant in retrospect, something passed between them. Not defined, not named. Just present the way a change in air pressure is present before the rain arrives. Ryan broke eye contact first. He checked his watch. 9:47. He stood picking up his bag. Emma's bedtime. Of course. Victoria straightened, and the professional composure settled back around her shoulders, like something she'd set down briefly and now picked up again. Captain Whitmore. Thank you. Ryan, he said. She paused. Pardon. You called me Captain Whitmore for an hour and a half while telling me about your dog's fear of ceiling fans, he said. Ryan's fine. For the second time in his presence, her mouth did that thing, that quick, unguarded twitch toward something that was almost, but not quite a smile, and this time it broke through. Ryan, she said. He nodded. Good night, Miss Harrington. Victoria, she said. He was almost to the door. Ryan. He turned. She was looking at the laptop, at the profile, at the photograph of herself sitting on a stone wall in Vermont, smiling in the evening light, with no idea the picture was being taken. Do you think it'll work? She asked. And what Ryan said was, I think it'll find you the right person. What he thought was something entirely different. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the parking garage, and stood there in the quiet hum of the empty building staring at the closed doors. I think the right person might already be in that office. He did not say it. He drove home. He relieved the babysitter, checked on Emma, asleep, arm wrapped around the stuffed pterodactyl she had named Gerald, and sat in the kitchen with a glass of water until midnight. Thinking about nothing. Thinking about everything. Telling himself with the same discipline he brought to every hard thing in his life that what he was feeling was simple human connection, nothing more. That he was a Navy officer, and she was his commanding contractor. That there was a professional wall there for a reason. That he was a single father, and she was a CEO, and that there were 1,000 reasons why the thought that had entered his mind in that elevator was not a thought he could afford to follow. He told himself all of this, and then he sat there in the kitchen in the quiet house and listened to the refrigerator hum and the distant sound of cars on the street, and the small sounds of his daughter sleeping down the hall. And he thought about a woman sitting alone in a corner office, looking at a photograph of herself smiling on a stone wall in Vermont. And he couldn't quite make himself stop. He thought that night was the beginning of helping someone else find what they were looking for. He was right about the beginning. He was wrong about the someone else. The profile went live on a Thursday. Ryan knew because Victoria told him, not in a meeting, not through official channels, but in the narrow hallway outside the liaison team's workspace at 8:47 in the morning, when she stopped beside him with her coffee cup and said without preamble, I posted it last night, and then walked away before he could respond. He stood there for a second holding his laptop bag, watching her go. He didn't know what he felt. He told himself it didn't matter what he felt. He went into the workspace, opened his technical review documents, and spent the next 4 hours doing his job with the focused efficiency that had made him valuable to every commanding officer he'd ever served under. He did not think about dating profiles. He did not think about Vermont photographs, or ceiling fan-fearing greyhounds, or the particular sound a person's voice makes when they're telling you something true for the first time. He was very disciplined about not thinking about any of it. By noon, he had reread the same paragraph of the targeting accuracy report 6 times. He closed the document and stared at the wall. Whitmore. His teammate Petty Officer Danny Reyes dropped into the chair across from him without being invited, which was Danny's defining personality trait. Danny was 29 from San Antonio and had the gift of noticing everything while appearing to notice nothing. You look like a man who's been arguing with himself all morning. I'm reviewing documents, Ryan said. You've been on the same page for 40 minutes, Danny said. I've been watching the scroll bar. Ryan looked at him. Don't you have work to do? Finished mine at 10:30. I'm efficient. Danny leaned back in his chair. What's going on? Nothing's going on. Right. Danny studied him with the calm, unhurried attention of someone who had learned patience from long shifts at sea. Is it the contractor thing? Because I've noticed you and Harrington have been... We worked together, Ryan said. That's all. Danny nodded in the way that meant he did not believe a single word of that, but had decided for now to let it go. Okay, he said. Sure. He picked up his coffee. How's Emma? And just like that, the tightness in Ryan's chest shifted. She told me this morning that the moon is a nightlight for the whole planet, he said. She's very concerned that nobody thanked it. Danny laughed a genuine full sound. She's 5 and she's already better at philosophy than most people I went to school with. Don't tell her that. She'll want it on a certificate. They talked about Emma for a while, and Ryan let himself be pulled back into the easier rhythm of that. The thing he understood, the thing that was uncomplicated and true, his daughter. The constant. The reason he kept going even on the mornings when going felt like the hardest possible thing to do. But later, driving home in the gray afternoon, he found himself wondering in the most disciplined, analytical, completely neutral way he could manage whether anyone had messaged Victoria yet, whether the profile had worked, whether she was sitting in that corner office reading through responses from people who had looked at the woman on the stone wall in Vermont and felt something. He told himself the wondering was just professional interest, the same way a contractor wants to know if the thing they built holds up. He was aware on some level that this was not a convincing argument. He was also aware that he was making it anyway because the alternative was admitting something he wasn't ready to look at directly. He picked up Emma from the sitters, listened to a detailed 17-minute account of what had happened at preschool that involved a disagreement about whose turn it was to water the class. Plant-made dinner, gave a bath. Read 3 chapters of a book about a rabbit who kept losing his hat. Turned out the light. He sat in the kitchen. He didn't think about Victoria Harrington. He thought about her for 2 hours. Then he went to bed. She found him the next morning before the workday officially started, which he was beginning to understand was a pattern she moved earlier than everyone else arrived before her own staff existed, in the liminal hours of the building, when it was still quiet, and the day hadn't yet arranged itself around her. 3 messages, she said, sitting down across from him in the liaison workspace without asking. She set her coffee on the edge of the desk. Since last night. 3 people actually sent messages. That's good, Ryan said. Is it? She looked at him. I haven't opened them. He blinked. Why not? Because... She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. Because opening them makes it real, and real means I might actually have to go on a date, which means sitting across from a stranger and explaining myself, which I find... She paused. I find it more stressful than presenting to a Senate subcommittee, which I realize sounds absurd. It doesn't sound absurd, Ryan said. Senate subcommittees aren't trying to figure out if they like you. They're just trying to figure out if your product works. She looked at him with a sudden sharpness, like something had snapped into focus. That's exactly it, she said. That's exactly what it feels like. A product review. And I don't know how to... She picked up her coffee, set it back down. I've never been good at the part where it's personal. That's what the profile is for, Ryan said. You put the real stuff in there. Anyone who messages you already knows more about who you are than someone you'd meet at a conference. That's a terrifying amount of access, she said. Yeah, he agreed. But it cuts the pretending time in half. She was quiet for a moment. Did you date, she asked, after your wife? The question landed softly, but it landed. He took a moment before answering the way he always did with things that deserve the weight of a moment. No, he said. Not once. Not once. He met her gaze. I told myself it was because of Emma. That she was too young, that introducing someone new would confuse her. And that was part of it. He paused. But mostly it was because dating means letting someone in, and I had spent a long time making very sure that particular door stayed shut. Victoria was looking at him with that quality of attention. She had the kind that made you feel like the only thing in the room which Ryan imagined was both her greatest professional skill and probably one of the lonelier things about her, because very few people gave it back. "So how do you do it?" she asked. "How do you decide the door is ready to open?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "I'll let you know when I figure it out." She held his gaze for one beat too long. Then she looked at her phone. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to open the messages. Now, before I talk myself back out of it." She unlocked the screen. He watched her read 3 separate pauses, 3 different expressions moving across her face in quick succession: assessment, doubt, something that might have been cautious interest. "Well," he asked. "One of them leads with his salary," she said. "Delete." Another one just says, "Hey," also delete. The third one, she stopped, read it again. He wrote about Iceland. Ryan felt something pull tight in his chest that he immediately set about ignoring. "What about it?" He said he's been twice, and both times he stood on the edge of a glacier and felt like the world had been cleaned. His words. She looked up. "He references the line in my profile, about feeling very small and very awake." Ryan nodded. "That's someone who read your actual profile," he said. "Not just the photo." "I know." She looked back at the screen. "That's why I'm nervous." "What's his name?" "Andrew." She paused. "He's a literature professor. 53. He has 2 grown kids." She scrolled slightly. "He looks..." Another pause. "He looks kind. In his photo. I know that sounds..." "It doesn't sound like anything," Ryan said. "That's a real observation." She lowered her phone. "What would you say back?" And so they did it again. Not a profile this time, but a message. The first one. The hardest one. The one that either opened a door or kept it closed. Ryan sat across from her and they went back and forth. Not him writing it for her, but him asking questions until she found the words herself, which was different. Which was the whole point. What did you think about his message? What do you actually want him to know? What would make you feel like you were being honest, rather than performing? By the time she hit send, her coffee was cold, and the building had started filling up around them, the sounds of the morning arriving like a tide coming in. "Thank you," she said, standing. She picked up her cold coffee, looked at it, set it back down. "Victoria," he said. She turned. "He's lucky you wrote back," Ryan said. Simply, meaning it. She studied him for a second. Then she walked out of the workspace back to her office, back to the other half of her life. And Ryan turned back to his documents and told himself firmly and finally, and without a lot of conviction, that he was going to stop doing whatever this was. He made it until Tuesday. Tuesday was when she came back and told him Andrew had asked her to dinner. She said it the same way she said most things, directly, without visible emotion. But Ryan had spent enough hours with her by now to read the things that existed in the space between her words, and what existed in that space was something close to terror. "That's good," he said. "I said yes," she said. "Even better." "I might have made a mistake," she said. "You haven't," he said. "You don't know that. I know that saying yes to dinner with someone who felt something when he read about Iceland is not a mistake," Ryan said. "Whatever happens after that is just information." She looked at him. "You're very calm about things that aren't yours to be calm about." "It's a Navy thing," he said. She almost smiled. Not quite. Almost. "He wants to go Saturday. There's a restaurant he mentioned. He said it's quiet, good food, the kind of place where you can actually have a conversation." "What do you want to wear?" Ryan asked. She blinked. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because you'll spend the rest of the week thinking about it anyway, and it's better to make the decision now so you can stop." Another pause. "You're oddly practical about this." "It's a Navy thing," he said again, and this time she did smile. Not the corporate version. Not the controlled professional expression, but the real one that started somewhere behind her eyes. It was brief. She caught it and tucked it away almost immediately. But he saw it, and the pull in his chest that he had been disciplinedly ignoring did something complicated that he chose not to examine. Something that's not a blazer, she said. Good call. She stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Ryan. Yeah. Why are you helping me with this? She asked. Not accusatory, not flirtatious, just genuinely curious in the way that she approached everything she didn't understand directly without pretending the question wasn't there. He considered the real answer for a second. Because you're the first person in 3 years I've sat in a room with who made me feel like a person instead of a function. Because something about the way you talk about Iceland at night when your guard is down makes me feel less like I've forgotten how to be alive. Because I saw you looking at your own photo with this expression on your face, like you'd forgotten she existed, the woman in that picture, and I couldn't walk past that. Because you asked, he said. She looked at him for one more second, then she nodded once and left. Ryan stared at the doorway for a moment. Then he picked up his pen and went back to work. Come. The date happened on Saturday. Ryan did not think about it on Saturday. He was extremely successful at not thinking about it. He took Emma to the park where she spent 45 minutes conducting what she described as a scientific investigation of a row of ants near the picnic tables, and he sat on a bench and watched her, and felt the particular uncomplicated joy that she generated in him, the thing that had kept him functional for 3 years, the thing he was most sure of in a world where very little felt certain. Daddy, Emma said without looking up from her investigation. Yeah, baby. Do ants have feelings? Scientists think they might have something like feelings, he said. Not exactly like ours, but something. Emma considered this with great seriousness. Then we should be careful where we step. Yeah, Ryan said. We probably should. He did not think about Victoria on the drive home. He did not think about her while making dinner. He did not think about her during bath time, or story time, or the approximately 9 minutes it took Emma to fall asleep once the lights were out. He thought about her the moment the house went quiet. He sat in the kitchen, his customary location for thinking things he didn't want to think, and he was honest with himself for probably the first time since the night in her office. He was not helping her because she asked. He was helping her because spending time with her felt like something he had forgotten was possible. Felt like a door he had told himself was locked, opening a quarter of an inch. Felt like the specific terrifying sensation of wanting something after a long time of not wanting anything. He was helping her find someone else. He was helping her find someone else, and the entire time he was doing it, some entirely irrational part of him was hoping in some small, inadmissible way that she wouldn't find anyone. That the profile wouldn't work. That every person who messaged her would turn out to be wrong for her in ways she could clearly identify. He was aware this was a terrible thing to think. He was aware he was thinking it anyway. He got up, poured himself a glass of water, drank it at the sink, and told himself very clearly that Victoria Harrington was his boss's equal in the professional hierarchy, that she was a successful, brilliant, emotionally complex woman who had been alone for years and deserved the chance to find something real, and that the job he had accidentally taken on helping her do exactly that was the right thing to do. And he was going to keep doing it without allowing himself to collapse into feelings that served no one. He finished the water. He went to bed. He stared at the ceiling for an hour, and he thought about the way she'd said Ryan that first night, the first time she used his name instead of his rank, like she was testing the weight of it. Monday, she found him before 8. It was good, she said. Ryan felt his jaw tighten and released it. Yeah, he's smart, really smart. She sat down across from him. We talked for almost 3 hours. The restaurant was exactly what he described. Quiet, no pressure. He knows a lot about literature, which I'd expected, but he also knows about architecture, which I hadn't, and She stopped. I ended up talking about wanting to be an architect. I haven't mentioned that to anyone in years. That's a good sign, Ryan said. I know. She paused. He asked me to dinner again. Are you going? I said yes. Another pause. I don't know what I feel exactly. It's been so long since I went on a date that felt functional, real, like two actual people in a room. She looked at him. Is that enough, that it felt real? That's more than most people get on a first date, Ryan said. She nodded slowly. He asked if I had friends, she said. People I was close to, and I... She stopped again, and he recognized the pause. It was the same one she made when she was about to say something honest. I didn't know what to say. I told him about my sister. He said I was lucky to have her. You are, Ryan said. I told him I was also... She looked at her coffee. I told him I'd recently reconnected with something, with the idea that it was possible to have an actual conversation with someone, and that I found that after a long time of not believing it was possible. She didn't look at him while she said it. He was quiet for a moment. What did he say? He said that was a beautiful thing to have found. She lifted her coffee. He's kind, Ryan. He's genuinely straightforwardly kind, and I realized I've spent so much time with people who use kindness as currency, something they extend when they want something back, that I forgot what it looks like when it's just the way someone is. Ryan looked at her. Then he sounds worth a second dinner. She met his eyes. He does, she said, but her voice had something in it that didn't match the words, not exactly. Something that landed slightly off the way a note does when it's close to right but not quite. He didn't name it. She didn't either. She left to start her day, and Ryan sat in the workspace with his documents open and his coffee cooling, and a feeling in his chest that he couldn't argue his way out of, because he had already tried every argument he knew. The second date happened the following Saturday, and the third the Saturday after that, and by the fourth week, Ryan had become, without any formal agreement or stated intention, the person Victoria debriefed with after each one. It happened naturally, the way things do when two people have already established a habit of honesty. She would find him in the workspace or in the hallway, or once in the elevator when they happened to arrive at the same time, and she would tell him about the evening, what they talked about, what she noticed, what surprised her. He listened. He asked questions. He offered observations when she asked for them. He did not tell her what he was feeling, because what he was feeling was not something she had asked about, and he was not the kind of man who put his problems into someone else's lap without being invited. But Danny Reyes noticed. Danny noticed everything which Ryan had always known and occasionally forgotten at inconvenient moments. She's going to end up with the professor, Danny said one afternoon in the workspace, not looking up from his laptop, voice casual enough to be deliberate. Ryan didn't answer. He sounds good for her, Danny continued. Smart, kind, two grown kids, so he gets the whole complicated life situation. A pause. Right. I don't know what she's going to do, Ryan said. But you have a feeling. Ryan looked at him. Danny. I'm just observing, Danny said. Completely neutral. Zero agenda. He looked up. You know you look at her differently than you look at anyone else in this building. I respect her professionally. That's not what I'm describing, and you know it. Danny closed his laptop. Look, man, I'm not trying to get in your head. I've known you 3 years. I've never seen you look at anything the way you look at her. He held up both hands. That's all I'm saying. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. It doesn't matter how I look at her, he said finally. She's seeing someone. She's a superior contractor. He stopped. She's what? She's not someone I get to... He stopped again. Danny looked at him steadily. Okay, he said. I hear you. He reopened his laptop. I just want to say, and then I'll never bring it up again, that I've watched you not get to do a lot of things for 3 years. And I think at some point, you get to decide whether that's the same as not deserving them. He went back to his work. Ryan stared at the wall for a long time. He thought about what Emma had said. Sometimes your eyes don't. He thought about sitting in that kitchen at midnight, counting the days since the hospital called, keeping count because stopping felt like surrender. He thought about the fact that survival was not the same as living, and he had known that for a while now, and still somehow hadn't done anything about it. He didn't do anything about it. But something in him shifted that afternoon. Some small, quiet thing, the way ice shifts in spring, not breaking yet, just beginning to move. The evening that changed everything between them arrived without warning, the way those evenings always do. It was a Wednesday a month and a half into the pattern they'd built. Ryan had stayed late again not for any formal reason, but because the work had been complex, and he had learned without examining it too carefully that the building in the hours after most people left was one of the few places where he felt something close to ease. He was walking past her office when the door opened and she appeared in the doorway, and he knew immediately that something had happened. Not from her expression, she had iron control over her expression, it was one of her defining characteristics, but from the particular way she was standing with one hand on the doorframe, like she needed the steadiness. "Ryan," she said. "What happened?" She didn't answer right away. She stepped back to let him in, and he entered the office, and she closed the door behind them, and that small, domestic, deliberately private gesture told him more than anything she'd said. "Andrew canceled tonight," she said. He stayed quiet, waiting. He was kind about it, very kind. He said he felt a connection, but not— She paused. Not the one he needed. He said there was someone from before, someone he'd thought he was over and realized he wasn't. She moved toward the window. He apologized 3 times. He meant everyone. "I'm sorry," Ryan said. "I'm not devastated," she said, which was true, he could hear it. "Which is maybe the thing that bothers me most. We'd been on 4 dates. He's a good man. I enjoyed his company. And the primary thing I'm feeling right now is—" She stopped. "What?" "Relief," she said, and it came out like something she hadn't meant to admit. "Which is—" She turned from the window. "What does that mean? What kind of person feels relief when something ends that was going fine?" Ryan thought about it honestly the way she deserved. "Someone who knew on some level that fine wasn't enough," he said, and was waiting to find out how it would end so they could stop waiting. She stared at him. "That's—" She stopped. "Is that what I was doing?" "I don't know," he said. "Were you—" The room was quiet. "Every time I came back from a date," she said slowly, "the first thing I wanted to do was—" She stopped. Started again. "The first thing I did was come find you, to talk about it, because you were the only person I—" She stopped a 3rd time. He waited. She looked at him. And this time, when the thing moved across her face, she didn't catch it and tuck it away. She let it stay. "You're the only person I actually want to tell things to," she said. "Real things, honest things, the Iceland things." She paused. "I've been going on dates with men who are perfectly good and thinking the whole time that I'd rather be talking to you." Ryan felt the breath go out of him slowly. "Victoria," he started. "I know," she said. "I know the 10 reasons this is complicated. I know you know them better than I do." She crossed her arms, not defensive, he understood. It was the way she held herself when she was being careful with something breakable. "I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. Because you taught me that the truth was worth something, and I figure I owe it to you to be honest even when—" She stopped. "Even when it makes things harder." The room was very quiet. Ryan stood there with the weight of everything he hadn't said pressing against his ribs from the inside, and he thought about Emma asking if he was sad. He thought about Danny saying at some point, "You get to decide whether that's the same as not deserving them." He thought about the room he didn't go into as often anymore. The door that hadn't been fully shut in the first place, not for a while now, not since a night when he'd knocked on an office door and seen lost on a face that was never supposed to show it. He took a breath. "I came back to this building every late night for 6 weeks," he said, "and told myself each time it was because the work required it." She was very still. "It wasn't because of the work," he said. Victoria looked at him. He looked at her. And something in the room. Some tension that had been building since a parking lot conversation about dating profiles, and a Vermont photograph, and a woman's love for quiet mornings, and old movies, and driving 2 hours. Because some things couldn't be replaced with convenience, something finally quietly broke open. "Ryan," she said. And his name in her mouth sounded different now than the first time she'd said it. Fuller, more sure. This is complicated, he said. My life is. He exhaled. Emma, my career. The professional. I know, she said. I need you to actually know, he said. Not in a theoretical way. In the way where it changes things. I know, she said again, and this time it landed differently. Steadier, like someone who had been thinking about exactly this for much longer than tonight. He nodded, once, slowly. And then he said the thing he had been not saying for 6 weeks. I stopped thinking about the work a long time ago, he said. When I come back here late, I'm coming back because... He paused, found the words. Because this is the only place I felt like myself in 3 years. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the opposite of empty. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people have just agreed to something neither of them has the exact language for, yet something real and complicated and worth the complication. Victoria uncrossed her arms. She reached out and put her hand on his forearm, brief, deliberate, gentle, in a way she almost never permitted herself to be. Okay, she said. Okay, he agreed. Outside the building, the city moved through its ordinary Wednesday night entirely unaware. Inside the corner office on the 14th floor, two people who had each spent years becoming experts at protecting themselves from exactly this stood in the quiet and let the thing that had always been there become real. It was not a declaration. It was not a beginning, not officially. It was something smaller and more honest than that. It was two people deciding at the same time to stop pretending they weren't already standing in the same place. And that Ryan would think later, not that night, but later when he had the distance to understand, it was when everything changed. Not with drama, not with a speech, just with a hand on his arm and the word okay, and the specific particular quality of a silence that finally meant something. The word okay turned out to be both a beginning and a complication. Ryan had expected the complication. He had not fully anticipated how quickly it would arrive, or how many forms it would take, or how it would feel different from every other hard thing he had managed in his life, because every other hard thing had only ever been about him. This one was about Emma, too. He didn't say that to Victoria that night. He drove home in the quiet dark of a Wednesday and sat in the parking spot outside his house for longer than necessary, staring at the front door with the porch light on. He always left it on when he was out past Emma's bedtime. A habit from her first year when the sitter had been nervous about the dark, and he tried to figure out what exactly had just happened, and what exactly he was going to do about it. What had happened was this: he had told Victoria Harrington the truth. A specific, bounded, honest version of the truth. That this building was the only place he'd felt like himself in 3 years. That his reasons for coming back weren't about the work. He had said it plainly the way he did most things without decoration or hedging because he had been raised by a man who believed unclear speech was a form of disrespect. He had not said I think about you when I'm not here. I have been carefully not thinking about you for 6 weeks and failing at it every single day. When you put your hand on my forearm tonight, it was the first time in 3 years that another person's touch felt like something other than comfort or professional courtesy. And I don't entirely know what to do with that. He had not said that, but he was afraid she had heard it anyway because Victoria Harrington was one of the most perceptive people he had ever encountered, and okay was a word that could hold a great deal if you let it. He went inside, checked on Emma. She was deep in sleep, one arm flung out sideways. Gerald the pterodactyl tucked under her chin. He stood in the doorway of her room for a long time. This was the part nobody talked about when they talked about single parents moving forward. Not the logistics of it, the scheduling and the introductions and the practical choreography. The part underneath that. The part where you stood in your child's doorway and understood with full adult clarity that every decision you made rippled outward into her life in ways you couldn't entirely predict, and that the weight of that was immense, and that you carried it anyway because you were her father, and that was the job. Emma had lost her mother at 2 years old. She didn't remember Sarah in the way that older children remember a lost parent, not with specific memories, not with the texture of a person's voice or the particular way she laughed. She remembered in impressions. In the dream she described about nice eyes. In the occasional quietly devastating question that arrived out of nowhere, like the one 18 months ago, when she had looked up from drawing and asked very calmly, "Does my mommy know I exist?" Ryan had told her yes. He believed it the same way he believed in certain things that couldn't be proven, that discipline mattered, that kindness compounded, that the people you loved didn't entirely disappear. He had not brought anyone into Emma's life in 3 years. Not a date, not a close friend, not even a woman from work that he mentioned by name more than twice in front of his daughter. He had been that careful, that deliberate, and now he was standing in the parking lot of his own house on a Wednesday night, thinking about the CEO of a defense technology company who had just told him she'd rather talk to him than anyone she'd dated, and trying to figure out what that meant for the 5-year-old asleep inside, who had already lost more than she could fully comprehend. He didn't have an answer. He went to bed. He didn't sleep for a long time. The next 2 weeks were a particular kind of careful. He and Victoria did not talk about what had been said in her office. Not because it was being avoided, at least not exactly, but because they were both. Ryan understood the kind of people who needed time to process real things before they could speak about them accurately. They had both spent years developing the discipline of not saying things before they were sure, and that discipline didn't disappear just because they'd had a moment of honesty. But things were different. They both knew it, and neither of them pretended otherwise. She stopped calling him Captain Whitmore entirely, even in group settings, which several members of his liaison team noticed and chose not to comment on except Danny, who said absolutely nothing and managed to communicate everything with the quality of his silence. She started sending him things. Not official documents, he already received those. Small things. An article about advances in architectural design that she'd forwarded with a single line, "Thought of you." Because of Emma's thing with buildings. A coffee sitting on his workspace desk with a sticky note that just said, "Tuesday is long." Once a photograph she'd taken through her office window of a remarkable cloud formation, texted to his phone with the caption, "Emma would want to investigate this one." He reciprocated. He couldn't help it. He sent her a voice memo of Emma explaining at length and with great authority why the moon preferred to come out at night rather than during the day, because it's polite, Daddy, it doesn't want to interrupt the sun's turn. Victoria sent back a single response, 3 letters lowercase, OMG. It was small, it was insufficient, and it was excessive. At the same time, insufficient because it didn't resolve anything, didn't name anything, didn't give either of them clarity about what happened next. Excessive because Ryan Whitmore had not texted anyone this way in 3 years, possibly longer, and the ease of it alarmed him slightly. He talked to Danny about it one afternoon. Not directly, he never did anything directly with Danny, because directness with Danny felt like handing him a winning poker hand, but sideways in the way men who aren't good at talking about things, nonetheless, end up talking about things. "Let me ask you something," Ryan said. Danny looked up. "You're going to ask me something about the contractor situation." "I'm going to ask you a hypothetical." "A hypothetical about the contractor situation." Ryan ignored this. "How do you know when you're making a decision because it's right versus making it because you want it to be right?" Danny was quiet for a moment, which meant he was taking the question seriously. "You don't usually," he said. "That's the whole thing. You make the call with the information you have, and you're honest about what's information and what's hoping. And if someone else gets affected by the call..." Danny leaned back. "Emma." Ryan didn't confirm it. Danny didn't need confirmation. "I've got a daughter," Danny said. "She's 7. Her mom and we split when she was 3. I've dated since then. Not much, but some." He paused. "The question I always ask myself is, am I trying to give her something, or am I trying not to take something from her? Because those feel the same, but they're not." Ryan turned that over. "What's the difference? Trying to give her something means you're thinking about who this person actually is and what they'd add. Trying not to take something means you're scared and you're making the fear the whole decision." Danny looked at him steadily. "You're scared." Obviously, I'm scared, Ryan said. Yeah, but you're not just scared, Danny said. Or we wouldn't be having this conversation. You'd have already shut the whole thing down. He picked up his coffee. You're scared, and you think it might be worth it. Those two things can both be true at once, man. Ryan didn't answer, but he thought about it for the rest of the day. He thought about it driving home. He thought about it making dinner and giving a bath and reading the Rabbit Hat book, which Emma had memorized well enough to correct him when he accidentally skipped a page. He thought scared and might be worth it. He thought both things at once. The conversation he wasn't expecting happened on a Friday morning when Emma's preschool called to say she had a fever and needed to be picked up, and Ryan was in the middle of a technical meeting with the HS engineering team that could not be interrupted, and his regular backup sitter wasn't answering, and his neighbor who was listed as his emergency contact was on a trip until Sunday. He stepped out of this meeting, called the school, explained the situation. They were patient. They were always patient with him, because he was the single dad, and the school was full of good people who felt for him in ways he sometimes found nearly unbearable, and told him they'd keep an eye on Emma in the office until he could figure something out. He stood in the hallway outside the conference room and ran through options quickly, the way he ran through anything under pressure, methodically without panic, assessing each one in seconds. His mother was 3 hours away in Maryland. His Navy brother Marcus, who had picked up Emma in 2 past emergencies, was currently on a training exercise. The other sitters he'd used were both at work. He was running out of options when Victoria walked past on her way back from a meeting with her CFO. She stopped when she saw his expression. What happened? He told her. She didn't hesitate for a second. I can go. He stared at her. I have a 2 o'clock board call that I can take from my car, she said. And I have nothing after that until 5:30. She was already reaching for her phone. What's the school's address? Victoria, you don't have to. Ryan. She said his name the way she said it when she meant business, not harshly, but with a fullness that closed the debate before it opened. Give me the address. He gave it to her. She texted him 40 minutes later. We're in my car. She has a low-grade fever. She says her throat hurts. She also says she knows 17 facts about dinosaurs that I don't know, and she intends to tell me all of them. Ryan stood in the hallway, looking at his phone, and felt something happen in his chest that was outside the catalog of things he knew how to name. He texted back, I'm so sorry. I'll be there in 2 hours, 3 at most. Victoria. No rush. She's asleep in the back seat. I pulled over so she could lie down. She's fine. Then, a minute later, she smells like children's Tylenol, and something that I think is peanut butter. It's very endearing. Ryan looked at his phone for a long moment. He went back into the meeting. He finished the work. He was there in an hour, 45. Victoria had taken Emma back to his house. He'd texted her where the spare key was, and by the time he got home, Emma was on the couch under her favorite blanket with the television playing something animated. Her cheeks flushed with low fever. Gerald, the pterodactyl, in a firm grip. Victoria was sitting on the other end of the couch with her blazer folded over the armrest. Her sleeves rolled up and a glass of water on the coffee table that she'd clearly been keeping track of. Emma looked at Ryan when he came in. Daddy, did you know that stegosauruses had brains the size of a walnut? I've heard that, Ryan said. I told Victoria, Emma said with satisfaction. Then she looked at Victoria. She didn't know. I did not know, Victoria confirmed. I told her 14 facts, Emma said. I was going to tell her 17, but I fell asleep. You can tell me the other 3 when you feel better, Victoria said. Emma considered this. Okay. She settled back into her blanket. Then with the particular directness that 5-year-olds reserve for the moments that make adults catch their breath. Victoria is nice, Daddy. She got me popsicles from the store. Ryan looked at Victoria. She looked back at him with an expression that was carefully neutral but had something underneath it that was not neutral at all. Something a little uncertain, a little hopeful, a little braced. "That was very kind," Ryan said. "They're the orange ones," Emma said. "My favorite." Her eyes were drifting. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby." "Can Victoria come back when I'm not sick?" The room was very quiet. Ryan looked at his daughter half asleep on the couch with her popsicle and her pterodactyl and her 14 dinosaur facts, and felt the thing in his chest do something he hadn't prepared for. "We'll see," he said. The answer parents give when they mean yes but need to be sure first. Emma accepted it the way she accepted everything she was mostly satisfied with. She closed her eyes. Victoria stood up quietly, reaching for her blazer. Ryan followed her to the front door. She stepped outside onto the porch and turned around, and he stood in the doorway, and they were both quiet for a moment. "Thank you," he said. "I mean it. That was... I wanted to," she said. "Don't thank me like it was an inconvenience I did you a favor about." She paused. "She's wonderful, Ryan." He looked at her. "She likes you." "I know." A brief pause. "That surprised me. I'm not..." She stopped, started again. "I'm not very good with children generally. I never know what to say. But she just started talking and I just started listening and it was..." She stopped again. "Easy. It was easy." He nodded. "I'm not trying to..." She caught herself, chose words more carefully. "I know what I am in your life right now. I know where the lines are. I'm not trying to skip steps." "I know," he said. "But I want you to know that when I said okay 3 weeks ago in my office..." She looked at him. "I meant it as something real, not as a professional calculation or a solution to loneliness. Real." She paused. "I just need you to know that." Ryan stood in his doorway and looked at this woman who had taken his call without flinching. Left her board meeting, picked up his sick daughter from school, bought orange popsicles because Emma's favorite mattered, sat on his couch with her blazer folded over the armrest, and he made a decision. Not with his head, which had been running calculations for 3 weeks, with something older and less precise. "Come for dinner Sunday," he said. "Not as anything official, just dinner." She looked at him. "Are you sure?" "No," he said honestly. "But Danny told me scared, and might be worth it, can both be true at the same time." Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, more like a door opening on something warm. "Who's Danny?" "A very annoying petty officer who is correct about more things than I'd like to admit." She looked at him for one more second. "Okay," she said. The word okay again. But this time it meant something different. More specific. More decided. More like an actual direction than a pausing point. She drove away. Ryan went back inside and sat on the edge of the couch near Emma's feet while his daughter slept off her fever, and he looked at the ceiling and made peace slowly with the fact that he had just invited Victoria Harrington to Sunday dinner, and that this was the most frightening thing he had done in years, and also somehow the first thing in years that had felt entirely necessary. Sunday dinner was pasta, because Emma had recently rediscovered spaghetti and considered it a personal affront when it wasn't available, and because Ryan was a competent cook in the functional sense of the word, he could produce things that were nutritious and edible and occasionally even good without any pretension about the process. Victoria arrived exactly on time, which he had expected, with a bottle of sparkling water, because she'd asked him before coming whether he preferred wine or non-alcoholic options, and he'd said either was fine, and she'd made a judgment call, and also with a small gift for Emma, a book about the moon, because Ryan had mentioned Emma's current phase with illustrations that were careful and detailed, and clearly made by someone who took the subject seriously. Emma received it with the gravity of a person being given something that mattered. She studied the cover. She opened it. She looked up at Victoria. "Did you read this?" Emma asked. "Not yet," Victoria said. "Then we'll read it together later." Emma decided and went back to the couch with it, which was, Ryan understood, the highest compliment his daughter could extend. Dinner was not quiet. Emma had things to say. The remaining 3 dinosaur facts. A theory about why stars blinked, a detailed account of the ant investigation from several weeks earlier. A question for Victoria about what it was like to be the boss of a big building, which Victoria answered with a seriousness that matched Emma's perfectly. She did not talk down to her. She did not perform delight in the way adults sometimes performed it with children, the exaggerated enthusiasm that kids could always see through. She just talked to her directly and honestly, the way she talked to everyone, and Emma responded the way she always responded to being taken seriously. She expanded. Ryan watched this from across the table and felt something settle in him that had been unsettled for a long time. He did the dishes while Victoria read 3 chapters of the Moon Book with Emma on the couch, and he stood at the sink listening to Victoria's voice, which dropped slightly in register when she was reading, becoming softer, less professional, more like something private, and Emma's intermittent questions, which came at irregular intervals because Emma never waited for a chapter break to ask things. "Victoria," Emma said at one point, clearly interrupting a paragraph. "Yes. Were you sad when you were little?" A pause. "Sometimes," Victoria said. "Why?" "Daddy says everybody gets sad sometimes, but then they get less sad," Emma said. "And then sometimes they get sad again, but also sometimes happy." "Your dad is right," Victoria said. "Are you happy now?" Another pause. Longer. "I think I'm getting there," Victoria said. "I think I'm a lot closer than I was a little while ago." Ryan stood at the sink with the water running and didn't move for a moment. Emma seemed satisfied with this. He heard the sound of a page turning. After Emma was in bed, Victoria had come in for the goodnight tuck-in because Emma had specifically requested it, her small arms going around Victoria's neck, with the trust that children extend without warning to people who have earned it in ways the child can't articulate. They sat at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of decaf and the particular ease of people who had just shared something real. "She's extraordinary," Victoria said. "She is," he agreed. "She asked me if I was happy." Victoria looked at her mug. "And She paused. "I gave her an honest answer, which is not usually what I do when I don't know the full truth of something. Usually I wait until I know." "What made you answer her?" "Because she was asking the way kids ask things without any agenda, without anything under it. She just wanted to know." Victoria looked up. "And I thought if I wasn't honest with her, I'd be doing something wrong. To her, to myself." She paused. "To this." Ryan looked at her. "To this," he said quietly. "Whatever this is," she said. "I don't have a word for it yet." "Neither do I," he said. "But I stopped needing a word for it about a week ago." She held his gaze. "Ryan, what happened to you losing Sarah, raising Emma alone? All of it. I don't want you to be with me because I showed up when you needed someone. I need you to know that's not enough for me. I need it to be—" "It's not that," he said. "You're sure?" "I've been alone for 3 years," he said quietly. "I've been capable of not being alone for 2 of those 3. I've had opportunities. People at the school, people at work, people that Danny practically pushed at me on 2 separate occasions." He paused. "I wasn't interested, not because I was broken, because none of it felt right. None of it felt real." He looked at her. "You feel real. You felt real since a night when you had your door open and an expression on your face that nobody else in your building would have recognized, and I recognized it because I've worn it myself every day for 3 years." Victoria was very still. "That's why," he said. "Not because you showed up, because you were already there. I just had to stop pretending I didn't see it." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had something in it he hadn't heard before. Not vulnerability exactly, something sturdier than that, but open in the same direction. "I've been in rooms full of people my entire career," she said, "and I've been alone in all of them. And then I was in a room with you, and I was—" She stopped. "Not alone. For the first time in longer than I can track. Just not alone." He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She looked down at it. Then she turned her hand over and held his back. They sat like that for a while, not talking, not needing to. But the thing about real life, as opposed to the version of it that existed in quiet kitchen moments with decaf coffee and a sleeping child down the hall, was that it didn't stay still. It moved. It produced complications. It generated friction in places you weren't watching. The friction arrived 10 days later. It arrived in the form of Commander Dale Bishop, who called Ryan into his office on a Monday morning with the particular economy of movement that meant the conversation was going to be brief and definitive. "Close the door," Bishop said. Ryan closed the door, sat down, waited. "I'm going to ask you something directly, and I need a direct answer," Bishop said. "Is there a personal situation developing between you and Victoria Harrington?" Ryan looked at him. "There's a friendship," he said, which was technically accurate and thoroughly insufficient, and he knew Bishop knew it. Bishop looked at him for a long moment. "Ryan, I've known you 6 years. You're one of the straightest Aero officers I've worked with. I don't expect you to do anything that compromises the partnership or your role in it." He paused. "But I need to know if I have to be aware of something, because if there's a conflict of interest developing, I need to know about it before someone else tells me." Ryan was quiet for a second. "It's new," he said finally. He stopped, started again. "It's real, but it's careful, and it's not affecting the work. I can tell you that with full confidence." Bishop studied him. "You're telling me it's real?" "Yes, sir." Bishop absorbed this. "She's a contractor partner. You're a liaison officer on a multi-year program." "I know. If this goes wrong..." "I know," Ryan said again. "And if it goes right," Bishop said slowly, "it's going to require some structural adjustment to the program. Recusal on certain decisions. Maybe a different liaison structure." He paused. "I'm not saying no, Ryan. I'm saying be sure. And be transparent. With me and with her." "Yes, sir." Bishop nodded. Then, in the voice he used for things that weren't official, "She good?" Ryan met his eyes. "Yeah," he said. "She's very good." Bishop picked up his pen. "Then figure it out properly," he said. "That's all." Ryan stood, walked to the door, stopped. "Bishop." "Whitmore." "Thank you." Bishop didn't look up from his desk. "Don't thank me. Handle it right." "Yes, sir," Ryan said, and meant it in both directions. He called Victoria that evening and told her about the conversation directly, completely, without softening any of the edges. He had promised Bishop transparency, and he had promised himself the same thing. She listened without interrupting, which was one of the things he had come to understand about her. She didn't fill silence out of nervousness. She let things finish before she responded. "So it's not impossible," she said when he was done. "It just requires adjustment. Structural adjustment," he said, "which means changes to the program that will require approval at levels above both of us. And if those approvals take time, then we're patient," he said. "Or we decide it's not, that the complication isn't worth it. That's also an option." A pause. "Is that what you want? To decide it isn't worth it?" "No," he said with the same flatness he brought to things he was certain about. "Good," she said. "Because I already talked to my legal team this afternoon." He blinked. "Already? I made a call at 3 o'clock, she said. "Before you told me about Bishop. Because I've been thinking about this since Sunday night, and I don't do things halfway, Ryan. I don't start things I intend to abandon at the first real obstacle." A pause. "There's a path. It requires documentation and a formal recusal structure for you on any decisions involving has contract terms. It's manageable." He was quiet for a moment. "You talked to your legal team before I said anything. I told you. I don't do things halfway." He thought about the first night in her office when he had asked her what she wanted people to know when they read her profile, and she had started slowly and then opened up like someone discovering a room she'd forgotten was there. He thought about her on his couch, with her blazer folded on the armrest and a glass of water on the coffee table. He thought about her voice dropping when she read to Emma, becoming something private and soft. "Victoria," he said. "Yeah. I'm glad I knocked on your door that night." A pause. Brief. When she spoke, her voice had that quality again, the open one, the one that didn't calculate first. "I'm glad I left it open," she said. They were quiet for a moment. "Emma asked me this morning if Victoria was coming back soon," Ryan said. "What did you tell her?" "I told her probably yes." "Probably?" "I was being conservative." "Ryan?" "Yes. Tell her yes," Victoria said. "Just yes. No probably." He laughed. It was a real one, the kind that came from somewhere below the surface, and it surprised him slightly, the way it always did when real things caught him off guard. "Okay," he said. And there it was again, that word doing its work, accumulating meaning every time it was spoken between them, building into something that neither of them had a full name for yet, but that was taking shape in the particular way real things take shape, slowly, honestly, with roots going deeper than the surface showed. He said goodnight. He put the phone down. He walked to Emma's room and stood in the doorway. She was awake, holding the moon book, looking at one of the detailed illustrations. "Daddy," she said, "is the moon made of rock?" "Mostly, yes." She studied the illustration. "That's okay," she said. "It's still beautiful." Ryan leaned against the doorframe. "Emma, Victoria's going to come back." Emma looked up. "Soon?" "Soon," he said. Emma processed this. Then she nodded in the satisfied, decided way she had about things that settled correctly in her understanding of the world. "Good," she said, and went back to her book. Ryan stood in the doorway a moment longer. He was still scared. He wanted to be honest about that with himself, with Danny, with Bishop, with the version of himself that sat in kitchens at midnight, running through reasons to keep every door shut. He was still scared, in the particular way that men who have already lost things are scared when they reach for something again, not the fear of failure, but the fear of what failure costs. The awareness that the stakes were real, and the people in the story were real, and that real things could hurt. But Danny had said it. He had said it himself to the ceiling above his bed a dozen times in the past weeks, trying to let it become true. Scared, and might be worth it. Both things at once. He looked at his daughter, reading her moon book, face tipped down in the light, completely peaceful. He thought about a woman sitting in a corner office, with a door left 6 inches open. He thought about the moment he had decided to knock on it. He had spent 3 years surviving, getting up and moving and functioning and being present for Emma, and useful for his country, and reliable for everyone who needed him. He had done all of that. And now, for the first time since a parking garage in Norfolk on an ordinary night that became the worst night of his life, he allowed himself to consider that maybe surviving was not in fact the whole story. Maybe there was something on the other side of it. Maybe this was what it looked like. Not perfect. Not without complication. Not without fear and paperwork and professional recusal structures and a 5-year-old who would need time and patience and honesty. But real. Undeniably, completely, in every direction real. He turned off Emma's light. He said goodnight. He walked back to the kitchen. He did not sit at the table until midnight this time. He poured a glass of water, drank it, washed the glass, and went to bed at a reasonable hour, like a man who had made a decision he didn't feel the need to keep second-guessing. And for the first time in 3 years, 4 months, and some number of days, he had stopped counting, he slept. Sleeping through the night turned out to be a one-time occurrence. Not because anything went wrong. Nothing went wrong, at least not immediately. But Ryan had spent so many years with his nervous system calibrated to light sleep and quick response that the moment something in his life shifted from manageable to meaningful, his body apparently decided rest was no longer a reasonable option. He lay awake not from dread the way he used to in the early years after Sarah. This was different. This was the wakefulness of a man who had something to think about and couldn't stop thinking about it, which was new enough that he didn't immediately recognize it for what it was. It took Danny Reyes pointing it out on a Tuesday morning in the workspace to name it. "You look better." Danny said, studying him with the focused attention of a man who had been watching something develop for months. I got approximately 4 hours of sleep, Ryan said. Yeah, but it's different 4 hours, Danny said. Before you looked like a man running on empty. Now you look like a man running on... He searched for the word. Anticipation. Ryan looked at him. I'm just saying, Danny said. There's a difference between tired because everything is heavy and tired because your brain won't shut up about something good. He picked up his coffee. That's the second kind. Ryan didn't answer, but he knew Danny was right, and knowing Danny was right felt like something he could live with, which itself was new. Because for 3 years, being right about anything had felt like just another weight to carry. The recusal structure took 3 weeks to formalize. During those 3 weeks, Ryan and Victoria existed in a state that had no clean category, not quite professionally, as they had been, not yet personally, as they were becoming threading through their days, with the particular awareness of two people who know something true about each other and are still figuring out how to carry it in the open. They were careful. They were not cold. There was a distinction between those two things that the people around them noticed, even without being told anything. Victoria's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Gloria, who had worked for her for 7 years and knew exactly how her boss moved through the world, said nothing directly. But she started keeping Ryan's coffee order in her mental database, which was Ryan understood Gloria's form of official recognition. Commander Bishop watched the formal structure take shape, with the expression of a man who had seen complicated things resolve themselves before and had learned to let the process run without interference as long as the work stayed clean. The work stayed clean, and in the evenings on the nights Ryan didn't have Emma, and on 2 Sunday dinners that became 3, and then 4 things between him and Victoria developed in the way that real things develop when the people involved are paying attention. Not dramatically, not in the movie moment fashion that implied an audience. Just honestly, with the grain of who they both actually were. She told him about her father, who had died when she was 23 in her second year at MIT, and who she had never fully mourned because grief had felt to her at that age like something that would interfere with surviving. She had built the company in the years after his death, and only understood much later that the driving need to build something was partly grief moving through her in the only form she knew how to let it. He would have liked you, she said. They were in his kitchen after Sunday dinner. Emma asleep, the house quiet. He was a veteran, Air Force. He didn't waste words, and he didn't trust people who did. And you think I don't waste words, Ryan said. You said more in your first sentence to me than most people say in an entire meeting, she said. You told me my bio sounded like a job application. That's economical and honest. And I've met maybe 4 people in my life who lead with that combination. He looked at her. What happened to the other 3? She considered. 1 became my CFO. 1 became my sister's husband. 1... She paused. 1 I let get away because I was 29 and more interested in the company than in anything else, and I've thought about that more than I'd like to admit. Regret or clarity? He asked. She thought about it. Clarity, she said finally. Regret would mean I'd do it differently. I don't know that I would. I think I needed to build what I built in the way I built it. I just wish I'd understood sooner that building things and letting people in weren't mutually exclusive. Ryan turned his coffee mug in his hands. I've thought that too, he said. About protecting Emma. About whether keeping everything tightly managed was protecting her or just... He stopped. Protecting yourself, Victoria said. Yeah. Both, she said. I think it was both. And that's not a failure, Ryan. That's just surviving. The way we both know how to do. He looked at her. You're pretty good at this, he said. At what? Saying the thing that's true without making it an accusation. She was quiet for a moment. I learned that from you, she said simply. That night with the profile, you told me the truth about what I'd written, and it didn't feel like criticism. It felt like care. She looked at him. I'd never had someone do that before. Be honest and kind at the same time. I didn't know that was possible in the same breath. Ryan was quiet. "I know that sounds," she started. "It doesn't sound like anything," he said. "Except true." She nodded. And they sat in the kitchen until well past midnight, two people who had each spent years believing that this specific kind of easy was something that happened to other people, discovering incrementally and somewhat astonishedly that they had been wrong. The crisis arrived in the 5th week. It arrived in the form of a phone call Ryan received on a Wednesday afternoon, not from anyone at work, not from Bishop or Danny or anyone connected to the life he'd been carefully navigating. It was from his mother, Patricia Whitmore, who lived in a house outside Annapolis where Ryan had grown up and who had a specific way of opening difficult calls that he had learned to identify before the second sentence. "I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to worry before I'm finished," she said. He walked out of the workspace and into the stairwell for privacy. "Tell me." "I've been tired lately," she said. "More than usual. I didn't say anything because you have enough, Mom. But I went to the doctor last week. They found something. On my kidney. They're fairly confident it's treatable. But I need a procedure and I need someone with me, and I didn't want to ask, but—" "I'm coming," Ryan said. "When's the procedure?" "Friday. I know that's—" "I'm coming Friday," he said. "I'll figure out Emma." "Ryan, you don't have to." "Mom." He said it the way she had always said his name when the conversation was done. Firm, full, not unkind. "I'm coming." She was quiet for a second. "Okay," she said. And then, in the softer voice she used for things she meant to say and usually didn't, "You sound different lately." "Do I?" "Less?" She paused. "Sealed," she said finally. "You've sounded sealed for 3 years, like something I couldn't quite reach through." A pause. "You don't sound sealed anymore." He leaned against the stairwell wall and felt the particular complexity of being known by someone who has known you your entire life. "I've been doing okay," he said. "You've been doing better than okay," his mother said, and that's all I was going to say about it. He smiled at the stairwell door. "I'll see you Friday." He went back into the workspace and started making calls. The babysitter could take Emma for the weekend. His Friday morning meeting at HAS could be moved. He was mid-calculation when his phone lit up on the desk. Victoria. "Your face looks like you just got news. Come find me when you can." He stared at the message. He had been in the workspace, she had passed the window on her way somewhere, and read his expression through the glass, the way she had learned to read him in 6 weeks, better than some people had managed in years. He went to find her. He told her in her office, standing rather than sitting, the way he stood when he was processing something. While he talked, movement helped him think, even when the movement was minimal. She listened. When he finished, she said, "Who's taking Emma?" "The sitter," he said. "She's available." "That's 2 nights alone with someone who isn't family," Victoria said. Not a challenge, just an observation stated flatly in the way she stated things she wanted him to actually hear. He paused. "I could take her?" Victoria said. He looked at her. "Not here," she said. "She's 5. She can't stay in an office all weekend. I mean, take her to my house. There's space. I have the Greyhound, which Emma will find extremely compelling." A pause. "I know what this is. I know it's fast. I'm not suggesting it to make a point about us. I'm suggesting it because you need to be in Annapolis with your mother on Friday, and you need to know Emma is somewhere real." Ryan was very still. "You don't have to," she said. "The sitter is a perfectly good option. I just wanted it to be an option." He thought about Emma, about his mother's voice on the phone saying sealed, about Victoria on his couch with her blazer off and a glass of water on the coffee table and a moonbook in her hand. "She's going to want to tell Ptolemy the dinosaur facts," he said. "Ptolemy has been waiting his whole life for someone to tell him the dinosaur facts," Victoria said. Ryan looked at her for a long moment, and then he made the call. Not the carefully calculated one, Not the one that went through every contingency in order. The one that his gut made in the space of a breath, the way he'd learned to trust in situations where overthinking was the only thing that got people hurt. "I'll talk to Emma tonight," he said. He talked to Emma at the kitchen table, the way he talked to her about everything serious directly, without talking down to her, with the respect for her understanding that she had always responded to. "Grandma Pat needs me to come help her for a couple of days," he said. "She's not feeling well." Emma absorbed this. "Is she going to be okay?" "Yes," he said. "The doctors are going to help her." Emma nodded. "Okay." Then, "Where do I go?" "I thought you might stay with Victoria," he said. "If you want to. The sitter is also available." Emma looked at him. The particular considering look she wore when she was assessing something with the full use of whatever faculties 5 years had given her. "Victoria has the dog," she said. "She does. The one who's scared of ceiling fans." "Ptolemy, yeah." Emma considered this for 2 more seconds. "I want to go to Victoria's," she said. And then, with the directness that had been stopping Ryan cold since she learned to speak, "Daddy, is Victoria your friend?" He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "She is. Your best friend." He paused. "She's becoming that," he said. "Yes." Emma processed this. "Okay," she said, the satisfied nod. "I'm going to teach Ptolemy to not be scared of ceiling fans." Ryan looked at his daughter. "That might take more than a weekend." "I know," Emma said, "but I can start." He dropped Emma at Victoria's house on Friday morning before driving to Annapolis. The handoff should have been brief bags instructions, emergency contacts, the medications Emma didn't need, but he always listed anyway, because listing them made him feel like a responsible person rather than a man leaving his child with someone he'd known for 6 weeks. But Emma, who had never been shy about walking into spaces that felt safe to her, went directly to Ptolemy, a long-legged gentle greyhound who regarded her arrival with the dignified uncertainty of a dog being approached by a creature at unexpected altitude, and knelt down in front of him and said very seriously, "I know about you. You don't have to be scared." Ptolemy sniffed her hand. Emma sat down on the floor, which placed her at exactly his level, and said, "I'm going to tell you about dinosaurs. It helps. Daddy says when you know facts about things you're scared of, they get less scary." Ryan stood at the door watching this. Victoria appeared beside him. "Where did she get that?" she asked quietly. "I have no idea," he said. "She invents things and they just come out true." Victoria was quiet for a second, watching Emma and Ptolemy. "She's going to be fine," she said. "Go." He looked at her. "If anything, I have all the numbers. I have the doctor. I have Bishop's number. If there's a Navy-related emergency, which I'm not sure how that would arise over a weekend, but I have it." She looked at him. "Ryan, go take care of your mother." He nodded. Then he crouched down. Emma looked up from her conversation with Ptolemy. "Yeah, Daddy. I'll call tonight. I know." She got up and came to him and put her arms around his neck, and he held her for a second, the particular specific weight of her, the smell of her hair, the way she patted his back twice, the way he always patted hers, because she had learned it from him and given it back. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," she said. "Tell Grandma Pat I made her a card." He had the card in his bag. She'd made it yesterday, a drawing of a house with a sun, and what he thought was a flower, but might have been a tree, and on the inside, in the careful large letters of a child still learning to manage a pencil, "Get well, Grandma Pat. Love, Emma. P.S. The moon is watching." He drove to Annapolis. The procedure on Friday went the way the doctors had said it would competently successfully, with the particular unglamorous efficiency of a medical system doing what it was designed for. His mother came out of it tired and in some discomfort, but clear-eyed and characteristically unsentimental about the whole thing, which was exactly how Patricia Whitmore approached everything that happened to her body as a logistical matter to be managed. "Stop looking at me like I'm breakable," she told him Friday evening from her hospital bed. "I'm not," he said. "You have the same face you had when Emma fell off the swing set at Thanksgiving," she said. "The controlled panic face." "I don't have a controlled panic face." "Ryan, I've been reading your face since 1985. You have a controlled panic face." She adjusted her pillow with the irritated efficiency of someone who found hospital pillows personally offensive. "Tell me about the woman." He went very still. "I told you I noticed something," his mother said. "I'm not an invalid. I'm just post-procedure. My perception is entirely intact." "Her name is Victoria," he said. His mother waited. He told her. Not everything, not the profile, not the fine-grained detail, but the shape of it. Who she was. How they'd met. Emma and the popsicles and the moonbook and the Sunday dinners. The way things had developed slowly, and then at some point all at once. His mother listened with her eyes closed, which was how she listened to things she was paying full attention to. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Sarah would have liked her, she said. He wasn't prepared for that. He felt it land in the center of his chest and stayed very still until he could breathe evenly again. "You don't know that," he said. "I know you," his mother said. "I know the kind of person you pay attention to. And it's always been the same kind people who are real, even when real is harder. Sarah was like that. And it sounds like Victoria is too." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "You've been alone long enough, Ryan." "I've had Emma," he said. "You know what I mean." He did know what she meant. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. "Means it matters." She closed her eyes again. "Now stop looking at me like I'm dying and go call your daughter." He called Emma at 9 that night. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been waiting with the phone nearby, and reported with great satisfaction that Ptolemy had permitted her to sit next to him during dinner and had only looked at the ceiling fan twice and looked away both times because Emma had redirected his attention. "He's learning," Emma said. "That's real progress," Ryan said. "Victoria made us pasta," Emma said. "Not as good as yours, but she tried very hard." "You told her that." "I told her it was delicious," Emma said. "Because she tried hard, and trying hard counts." Ryan sat in the hospital corridor and felt an emotion he didn't have a single word for, something made up of equal parts gratitude and love, and the specific amazement of watching the person you were most responsible for turn out to be better than you. "That was very kind of you, Em." "I know," Emma said without false modesty. "Daddy, Ptolemy slept on the end of my bed." "Yeah, I think he's not as scared as he was," she said. "Sometimes you just need someone to sit with you." Ryan pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose for a second. "Yeah, baby," he said. "Sometimes you do." He was back Sunday afternoon. Victoria met him at the door, not performing ease, not managing the moment, just standing there when he arrived, the way someone stands when they've been expecting you. Emma was visible behind her on the couch, deep in the moonbook Ptolemy, a long warm weight along her side. "How's your mother?" Victoria asked. "Good. Tired. Already arguing with the nurses about her discharge timeline. Strong woman." "Terrifyingly so." He exhaled. "How was—" "It was good," Victoria said. Simply. "It was really good, Ryan." He looked past her at Emma, who had not yet noticed he was back absorbed, as she was in something on the page that clearly required her full attention. She told Ptolemy all 17 dinosaur facts, Victoria said. Twice. He's significantly less nervous than he was Friday. "Emma told me," he said. "She said sometimes you just need someone to sit with you." Victoria went still for a second. "She said that," verbatim. Victoria looked back at Emma for a moment, something moving across her face that was too layered to be one single emotion. She turned back to Ryan. "She's going to be something," she said. "She already is," he said. Emma looked up then, and her face did what it always did when he came back from anywhere, that complete uncomplicated light, the expression of someone for whom his presence was simply the correct state of things. "Daddy!" She launched off the couch. Ptolemy, startled, slightly recovered his dignity and crossed the room and hit him at full speed, which was an experience he had been cataloging for years because he was aware it wouldn't last forever, and he intended to remember every version of it. He picked her up. She wrapped herself around him with the total commitment she brought to physical affection. "I missed you," she said into his shoulder. "I missed you too, baby." "Ptolemy slept on my bed again last night," she said. "Victoria says that's not usually allowed, but she made an exception." He looked at Victoria over Emma's shoulder. Victoria looked back at him with an expression that said she was not going to apologize for the exception. He loved her. He hadn't said it yet. He had been working toward the truth of it for weeks, approaching it the way you approach something that changes everything carefully with full awareness of what it means. But standing in Victoria's doorway with Emma's arms around his neck and Victoria looking at him with that open, steady expression that had replaced the one she'd worn on the night he first knocked on her door, he understood that the sentence was no longer waiting to be said. It was simply true already, with or without the words. He would find the right moment for the words. He would find them soon. "Can we have pasta for dinner?" Emma asked. "Victoria made it last night, but she said you make it better." "I didn't say that," Victoria said. "You said Ryan's is probably better when you thought I was asleep," Emma said. Victoria looked at Ryan. "She has excellent hearing." "I know," Ryan said. "I've been dealing with this for 5 years." Emma wiggled to get down. She went back to the couch, back to the moonbook, back to the long warmth of a dog who had in 48 hours decided she was trustworthy. Ryan stepped inside. He closed the door behind him. He stood in Victoria's entryway, in the house she'd built alone and lived in alone, and filled with the careful, specific choices of a person who had never quite trusted that she deserved anything different, and he looked at her. "Thank you," he said, not as a closing, as an opening. She seemed to understand the difference. "I should be thanking you," she said. "We can argue about it later." "I'll win," she said. "You usually do," he agreed. She looked at him for a moment. "Ryan?" "Yeah." "Your mother." She paused. "She called me Saturday." He blinked. "She called you?" "She got my number from your phone. Emma apparently unlocked it to show her a photo, and your mother took the opportunity." A slight pause. "She said she wanted to thank me for taking Emma, and then she talked for 45 minutes. Another pause. "She told me about Sarah." Ryan was quiet. "She told me that Sarah used to say that loving someone well was a skill, not just a feeling, that it required practice and intention, and showing up even when it was inconvenient." Victoria held his gaze. "She said she thought I might be someone who already understood that." The room was very quiet, except for Emma turning a page, and Ptolemy making the small sound he made when he shifted into deeper comfort. "She's a perceptive woman," Ryan said, his voice slightly rougher than he intended. "Terrifyingly so," Victoria said. "Your words. Very accurate." He looked at her. Everything that had been building for weeks, the careful management of it, the disciplined patience, the choosing of the right moment, over and over, and the moment never being entirely right, because no moment was ever entirely right. When the stakes were real, all of it reached a kind of quiet conclusion, not a climax, not a dramatic arrival. Just the simple, complete feeling of a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, setting it down, not because he was giving up, but because he had finally found ground solid enough to stand on without it. "Victoria," he said. She waited. "I think I'm in love with you," he said. "I'm not completely sure when it happened. I know it was somewhere between Vermont Photograph and Sunday Pasta, and a 5-year-old teaching your dog to be less afraid of ceiling fans." He paused. "And I know what it cost to say that. I know the complicated version of this. I know about the career and the structure and the thousand things that have to be worked out still. He met her eyes. And I want to work all of them out. That's the part I needed you to know. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, long enough that he registered at that pause and held it. Ryan, she said finally, I have been in love with you since you told me my bio sounded like a job application. She paused. I just needed you to get there on your own, because you're the kind of man who has to understand something completely before he'll trust it. He stared at her. Since the first night. Since the first night, she confirmed. You went on 4 dates, he said. I was trying to be reasonable, she said. I am not naturally a reasonable person. I was making an effort. He laughed the same real laugh that surprised him every time, the one that came from below the careful surface. You could have said what? She said. I met you 10 days ago, and I'm pretty sure I'm in love with you. That's not a sentence I could have delivered without evidence. She looked at him. I needed you to see it. I needed to watch you figure it out. Because watching you figure things out is the most... She stopped, started again. Because when you understand something, Ryan, you understand it all the way. And I needed to know that whatever you got to, you'd gotten there completely. He looked at her. She looked at him. In the background, Emma turned another page. Ptolemy exhaled contentedly. The house held them, all of them, in its Saturday afternoon quiet. He crossed the space between them and put both hands on either side of her face, and she put her hands over his, and neither of them said anything for a moment because the moment was already full. I'm all the way there, he said. I know, she said. I could tell. He pressed his forehead to hers. Daddy! Emma called from the couch, not alarmed, just present. Yeah, Em. Are you going to make the pasta? Victoria made a sound against his forehead that was quiet and real and the best thing he'd heard in years. Yeah, baby, he said. I'm going to make the pasta. He stepped back. Victoria was looking at him with an expression that had nothing managed in it, nothing professional, nothing held in reserve. Just her, the full version, the one she'd been protecting for years, the one that had been visible in a photograph on a stone wall in Vermont when she didn't know anyone was watching. He took her hand. They walked to the kitchen. Emma looked up as they passed. She took in the hand. She looked at Ryan. She looked at Victoria. She looked back at Ryan. She nodded once with the decisive satisfaction of someone who has confirmed something they already knew. Good, she said, and went back to her book. The resignation letter happened 6 months later, not because things had fallen apart, because they hadn't, and that distinction mattered more than Ryan could have explained to anyone who asked, though Danny Reyes understood it without explanation, and Commander Bishop understood it in the particular way of a man who had watched the situation develop from a professional distance and respected what he saw. The letter was Ryan's idea. It was also, he knew, the right idea, the kind of decision that feels like loss on the surface and is actually the opposite underneath. The HAS Partnership Program was entering its final phase. His role on the liaison team had run its natural course. Staying on specifically to manage the last 3 months of contract documentation while being in a relationship with the CEO wasn't a conflict that paperwork could fully resolve, and Ryan was not a man who did things halfway. Bishop had said as much in their last formal conversation about the matter, handle it right. This was handling it right. He wrote the letter on a Thursday evening at the kitchen table with the particular focus he brought to things that required precision. Emma was at Patricia Whitmore's for the week. His mother, fully recovered, had been making up for lost time in the grandmother department, with a determined thoroughness that Emma found entirely acceptable, and the house was quiet, in the specific way it was only when Emma was away, a silence that had texture to it, the shape of a person temporarily missing. He finished the letter, read it through twice, set it face down on the table. Then he called Victoria. I finished it, he said when she picked up. A pause. Not surprised she had known this was coming, had been part of the conversation about it from the beginning, but present with it in the way she was present with things that mattered. How does it feel? He thought about it honestly. Like the right thing, he said. Which is different from easy. Most right things are, she said. I know. I just wanted to say it out loud to someone who'd understand both parts. I understand both parts, she said. I know you do, he said. That's why I called you first. She was quiet for a moment. Ryan, what comes after this for your career? I've been talking to Bishop, he said. There are options. Other assignments. A training program I've been considered for. Nothing is closing. He paused. Everything is actually opening. I just had to be willing to close one door first. Are you worried? No, he said. And he was telling the truth, which still surprised him slightly, the absence of the low-grade worry that had lived in him for years, like a frequency running beneath everything else. It wasn't entirely gone. But it had changed character. It had become something manageable, something he could set down and pick back up, rather than something he carried without noticing because he'd forgotten what it felt like not to. Good, Victoria said. Because I need to tell you something. He waited. I told the board about us, she said. Formally. Today. He was quiet for a second. He knew this was coming too. She had been preparing for it, structuring the disclosure carefully with her legal team and her chairman in the way that Victoria approached anything that touched the company she'd spent a decade building. But knowing it was coming and hearing that it had happened were different things. How did they take it? He asked. Professionally, she said. Two of them asked about the recusal structure. One asked if it affected the program timeline. One, Robert Caldwell, who's been on my board since year 3 and thinks of himself as my unofficial uncle, said, and I'm quoting directly, "It's about time, Victoria." Ryan smiled. I like Robert Caldwell. He's insufferable and usually right, she said, which is an annoying combination. A pause. They're fine, Ryan. The company is fine. Everything we were careful about worked. We were careful, and it worked. He exhaled slowly. Not relief exactly. Confirmation. The feeling of a structure that was load-bearing, holding up the weight you put on it. Okay, he said. Okay, she said back. The word had accumulated so much history by now that it barely needed anything around it. It was its own complete sentence. It meant, I see you. I'm here. We're doing this. It meant everything they had been building since a night in a corner office when a door had been left open 6 inches, and a man who almost kept walking had decided to knock. He submitted the letter the next morning. Bishop received it, read it, set it on his desk, and looked at Ryan across the desk in the specific way he had, that complete measuring attention that had always felt to Ryan less like being evaluated and more like being accurately seen. You're sure? Bishop said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. The training program assignment comes through in about 8 weeks, Bishop said. It'll keep you stateside, which I imagine is relevant. It's very relevant, Ryan said. Bishop nodded. He picked up his pen. Ryan. Sir. You've been one of the best officers I've had the privilege of working with, he said. It came out plainly without ceremony, which was the only way Bishop ever said things he genuinely meant. Whatever comes next in uniform or out of it, eventually do it the same way you've done this. Straight. Ryan met his eyes. Yes, sir. Bishop signed the acknowledgement form, set it aside. Now get out of my office, he said. I have 40 minutes of paperwork that your departure is generating. Ryan stood. Bishop. Whitmore. Thank you. For all of it. Bishop looked at him for a moment. Then he looked back down at his desk. Tell that little girl of yours that her grandfather would have been proud of her father, he said to the paperwork. Ryan stood at the door for a second. He thought Bishop's grandfather comment was the closest the man had ever come to saying something personal in 6 years of professional relationship, and he recognized it as such and chose not to draw attention to it because that was also the right thing to do. He walked out. Danny was waiting in the hallway. Not accidentally. Danny was never anywhere accidentally. He was leaning against the wall with his coffee, like a man who had been there long enough to look casual, but had clearly positioned himself specifically. "So," Danny said. "So," Ryan said. "How's it feel?" Ryan thought about it. "Like I put something down that I didn't know I was still carrying." Danny nodded slowly. "You know what I noticed," he said. "About you over the last 6 months. You're going to tell me regardless of what I say." "You started finishing your coffee," Danny said. "Every morning for 3 years, you'd make coffee and drink about 2/3 of it, and then get caught up in something and leave the rest. I started noticing it in the first month working with you." He paused. "Last couple months you finish it." Ryan looked at him. "You tracked my coffee consumption." "I'm observant," Danny said. "It's a gift and a curse." He pushed off the wall. "For what it's worth, and I know you didn't ask, but I'm telling you anyway, watching you get here has been one of the better things I've seen in my career." He extended his hand. "She's good for you. Emma likes her. You finish your coffee. That's a full picture." Ryan shook his hand, held it for a second. "You're a pain in my ass, Danny." "Consistently," Danny agreed. "It's part of the value I add." They walked out of the building together in the sharp morning air. Two men who had shared a workspace and a proximity to each other's lives for long enough that the friendship had calcified into something that didn't require much maintenance, and Danny peeled off toward the parking lot, and Ryan stood for a moment outside the building and looked up. The sky was doing something remarkable, the kind of early morning cloud formation that Emma would have wanted to investigate, all lit from underneath, moving quickly in the wind off the water. He stood and looked at it for a moment. He thought Emma would say, "The moon made those to be polite to the sun." He took out his phone and photographed them. He sent it to Victoria. "Emma needs to see this." She responded 40 seconds later. "Already sent it to her. Your mother showed her how to use the video call this week. They've been talking every morning." He stared at his phone. His 5-year-old daughter, his recovering mother, his Victoria, on video call. Every morning. While he was at work, unaware a triangle of women in his life forming a connection that had apparently been developing entirely without his knowledge. He typed back, "When did this start, Victoria?" "About 3 weeks ago. Patricia called to check on Emma." Emma answered, "I'm not sure I was involved in the decision." Ryan, "I'm not sure any of us are ever involved in Emma's decisions." Victoria, "She's going to run something someday." Ryan, "I know. I'm trying to prepare myself." He pocketed his phone. He was smiling, not the functional surface smile that had carried him through the last 3 years, but the other kind. The kind Emma had identified from a distance at 5 years old and accurately diagnosed as missing. The kind where the eyes were in it too. The Sunday dinner, that became the Sunday dinner. The one that would be referenced later by everyone present as the one where things became permanently, officially, irrevocably real, happened 3 weeks after Ryan submitted his letter. It was at his house. Emma had been home for a week since returning from her grandmother's and had immediately resumed her management of Ptolemy's ceiling fan anxiety, which Victoria had agreed to facilitate by bringing the Greyhound to Sunday dinners. A decision that had transformed the dinners into something considerably louder and more joyful than their early incarnations. Patricia Whitmore drove down from Annapolis. She arrived before Victoria, which Ryan understood was intentional. His mother did not do accidental timing and spent 20 minutes in his kitchen in a state of comprehensive assessment that she conducted while ostensibly helping him with garlic bread. "She's good," his mother said without preamble. "I know," Ryan said. "I mean in the specific way," his mother said. "Not just successful or smart or whatever the practical list is. I mean good. The kind of good that's in a person's character and not their circumstances." She turned from the counter. "Your father was like that. You're like that. It's the most important quality, and it's the rarest one, and she has it." Ryan looked at his mother. "I know," he said again, more quietly this time. "She's scared too," his mother said. "In case you haven't noticed." "I've noticed." "Good." She went back to the garlic bread. "Then you know to be patient." The same patience she gave you while you were figuring yourself out. She paused. It's your turn now. What do you mean? I mean, she's been alone a long time, Ryan. Different kind of alone than yours was. Grief, hers was armor. Years of it. And armor doesn't come off all at once just because you've decided to take it off. She looked at him. Some mornings she's going to wake up and not know who she is without it. And on those mornings she's going to need you to remind her. The same way she's been reminding you. Ryan was quiet. Your father did that for me, she said simply. The first 2 years were me figuring out if I trusted it, if I deserved it. He just stayed. She put the bread in the oven. That's the whole job sometimes, staying. He thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. Through Victoria's arrival, through Emma's immediate commandeering of both Victoria and Ptolemy for a backyard moon visibility assessment, through his mother and Victoria finding each other in the kitchen and beginning a conversation that appeared within 10 minutes to be completely self-sustaining and requiring no input from him whatsoever. He stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the yard, where Emma was explaining the moon's schedule to a greyhound with patient ears, and he watched his mother and the woman he loved talking at his kitchen table, with the ease of two people who have already decided to like each other and are just filling in the details. He stayed in that doorway for a long time. After dinner, after Emma was in bed, Ptolemy curled at the foot. This time fully permitted a household rule that had been quietly rewritten by consensus. Ryan and Victoria and his mother sat on the back porch in the cooling evening with decaf coffee and the specific companionable quiet of people who have fed each other and don't need to fill the silence. Patricia Whitmore looked at the stars for a while. Then she said, Ryan's father proposed to me on a Tuesday. Not a special Tuesday, just a Tuesday. She held her coffee cup. I asked him why a Tuesday, and he said because he'd been sure since the previous Wednesday and waiting a whole week felt like the longest reasonable amount of time. She paused. I thought that was the most romantic thing I'd ever heard. Not the proposal the Wednesday. The being sure since Wednesday. Ryan looked at his mother. Victoria looked at her coffee. I'm going to go check on Emma, Patricia said, standing. She picked up her cup. She walked inside without looking at either of them. The back porch was quiet. Ryan looked at Victoria. She was looking at the yard, her profile in the dim evening light, carrying the expression she had when she was thinking about something real. The slight tension between her brows, the stillness of her hands. Victoria, he said. She turned. I've been sure since a Wednesday, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then something happened on her face that he had never seen there before. Not the controlled professional expression, not the careful openness she extended when she trusted someone, not even the real smile that appeared when she forgot to manage it. Something deeper than all of those. Something that had been behind every version of her he had met waiting. Ryan, she said. Don't say something you're not ready to mean all the way. I mean it all the way, he said. I told you, when I understand something, I understand it completely. She was quiet. I'm not asking tonight, he said. I want to be clear about that. This isn't the moment I've planned for that, and when I do that, I'm going to do it right. With Emma involved. With the right time. He paused. But I needed you to know where I'm pointed. So you know. So there's no wondering on your end. She looked at him for a long time. You know what I thought, she said, the night you knocked on my office door. What? I thought this is someone I'm going to have to work very hard not to feel things about. She held his gaze. I was right about the second part. I was completely wrong about the first. He reached over and took her hand. She laced her fingers through his. They sat on the back porch in the evening, two people who had each spent years mastering the architecture of surviving alone, and they let themselves occupy the same space without managing it or measuring it or calculating what it cost. Inside the house, Patricia Whitmore sang something very quietly to a sleeping 5-year-old who had demanded one more verse of a song she was inventing as she went. A greyhound breathed slowly at the foot of a small bed. The house held all of it, the history of it, the grief that had lived in it, and the joy that was moving in to stay the particular quality of a space that has been waiting patiently for all its rooms to be used. 4 months after that porch evening on a Saturday in early autumn, when Emma was at the park with Danny Reyes and his daughter Lucia, who had become Emma's primary scientific collaborator since their first meeting. 3 weeks earlier, Ryan drove to a jewelry store in downtown Norfolk that had been recommended by Victoria's sister, who had been recruited into this plan without difficulty, because she had apparently been waiting for it almost as long as Ryan's mother had. He spent 40 minutes in the store. The woman who helped him was patient and direct, and did not oversell anything, which he appreciated. He found what he was looking for in the third case. He looked at simple, specific, not ostentatious, the kind of thing that said, "I see exactly who you are," rather than "look at what I can do." He bought it. He drove home. He sat in the kitchen, this table, this room that had held so many midnights of his life, and he set the small box on the table and looked at it for a long moment. He wasn't afraid. That was the thing he noticed and kept noticing, because the absence of the fear was almost as significant as the decision itself. He had been afraid for so long, afraid of loss, afraid of failure, afraid of reaching for something and having it pulled away, afraid of loving something again, because loving things made you vulnerable to the cost of losing them. He had managed that fear into productivity, into discipline, into the kind of reliability that made everyone around him feel safe, while he stood at the center of his own life, making sure all the structures held. He wasn't afraid now. He was something else entirely. Something that sat in the same space fear used to occupy, but felt completely different. Felt like standing on something solid, like knowing the ground was there before you put your weight on it. He thought about what his mother had said. The being sure since Wednesday. He'd been sure since longer than that. He'd been sure, if he was being completely honest, since a night in a conference room when a woman's mouth had done something that was almost but not quite a smile, after an attorney said something catastrophically wrong, and he had recognized, in that tiny suppressed expression, someone whose interior life was considerably more interesting than her exterior management suggested. He'd been sure. He'd just needed time to trust it. He picked up his phone. "Emma Lucia says she can name all the planets. I told her that's not hard. The moons are the interesting part." He typed back, "That's my girl. Emma Daddy. Are you home, Ryan? I'm home. Come back when you're ready." Emma. "Okay." Daddy. Ryan. "Yeah. Emma, is Victoria coming for dinner?" Ryan looked at the small box on the table. He looked at it for a moment. Then he typed, "Yeah. Victoria's coming for dinner. Emma, good. I have something to tell her about Europa." Ryan. "What about Europa?" Emma. "It might have an ocean under the ice." Daddy. "A whole ocean, where no one has ever been." He stared at his phone. He thought about oceans under ice, about things that existed in places no one had looked yet, about the world being larger than what was visible on the surface, and the particular courage it took to believe that, and to dive anyway. He put the phone down. He looked at the box. He was ready. Victoria arrived at 6 with wine and a container of the pasta she'd been practicing. She had decided, with the focused determination she brought to any skill she decided to acquire, that she was going to learn to make it properly. And she had been getting measurably better over the course of 3 months of Sunday iterations. And Emma met her at the door and immediately began the Europa briefing, which lasted through the kitchen, through the setting of the table, and partially through the first course. Ryan watched this from across the table. His daughter and the woman he loved, deep in a conversation about subsurface oceans and the definition of habitable, both of them entirely serious. Ptolemy monitoring from the corner with the dignified patience of a dog who had accepted his place in a household that was considerably noisier than it used to be. He waited until after dinner, until Emma had been bathed and read to and had extracted a promise from Victoria that they would look up more information about Europa's ocean together next weekend. Until the house had settled into the quiet that came after a child's bedtime, the specific piece of it. He and Victoria were at the kitchen table. Coffee between them. The ordinary furniture of their life together already so established that he couldn't entirely remember what the kitchen had felt like in the years before it contained her. "Victoria," he said. She looked up. He reached into his pocket, set the box on the table. She looked at it, then at him. "I told you 4 months ago where I was pointed," he said. "I told you I'd do it right, with Emma involved." He paused. "I asked her this afternoon, before you came." Victoria's expression moved somewhere beyond what he could track. "You asked Emma?" "I told her what I was thinking. I asked if she thought it was a good idea." He held Victoria's gaze. She said yes. Then she said she had one condition. Victoria's voice was very careful. "What was the condition?" "That Ptolemy gets to sleep on the bed," he said. "Officially, not just on weekends." Something broke open on Victoria's face, the thing that had been behind everything, behind the CEO, and the composure, and the decade of careful armor, the person who had been in that Vermont photograph, on the stone wall, with the evening light, smiling at nothing free for just a moment. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were bright. "She negotiated," Victoria said. "She absolutely negotiated," Ryan confirmed. "She had terms." Victoria made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something else entirely. "She's going to run something someday." "I know," he said. "I've accepted it." He opened the box. She looked at it. At him. At the ring that was exactly right, not what someone else would have chosen, but what someone who had been paying close attention to who she actually was would choose. "I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago," he said. "I'm not the sealed version of him that was just getting through days. I am—" He paused, found the words the way he always found them, slowly, precisely making sure they were right before he said them. "I'm the version of him that Emma sees now, the one whose eyes are in it." He held her gaze. "You did that. You and Emma together. You gave me back something I thought I'd handed in permanently." He paused. "I want to spend the rest of my life giving it back to you." Victoria looked at him. She was not the woman from that first meeting composed armored operating at a frequency most people couldn't tune into. She was the woman from the photograph, present, open, smiling in the evening light without managing it. "Yes," she said, the way she always said it when she was completely certain. Direct, full, no modifiers. He put the ring on her hand. She looked at it for a moment. Then she reached across the table and held his face in both hands, the way he had held hers in her entryway months ago. And she looked at him with the full, unguarded expression of a person who has stopped protecting themselves from the thing they want most. "Ryan Whitmore," she said. "You knocked on an open door and changed my entire life." "You left the door open," he said. "I think," she said softly, "I left it open for you." From down the hallway, Emma's voice. Did she say yes? They both looked toward the hallway. The door was open exactly 6 inches, precisely the same width as a certain office door on a night that had started everything, and one small eye was visible at the gap. "Emma," Ryan said. "I'm just checking," Emma said. "Go to sleep," he said. "But did she?" "Yes," Victoria said. She said yes. A pause. Then the sound of small feet retreating rapidly down the hallway, followed by the particular noise of a 5-year-old throwing herself joyfully back into bed, followed after a moment by the heavier sound of a large greyhound rearranging himself at the foot of it. Then, quiet. Ryan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Ryan. They sat in the kitchen that had held so many midnights, the hard ones, the empty ones, and now this one, which was neither. And they let the quiet be what it was. Not the quiet of a house too empty. Not the quiet of a man sitting alone at a table counting days. The quiet of a family that had found its shape improbably and without a plan through the specific grace of a door left open and a man willing to knock. This was not the end of the hard things. Ryan knew that. There would be adjustments and complications, and mornings when the armor came off too slowly, and evenings when the weight of the past made itself known. There would be a little girl growing up, and a career redirecting, and a life that required constant conscious tending. But there would also be this kitchen, this table, this woman wearing a ring that was exactly right, looking at him with her whole face, nothing held back. There would be Europa, and dinosaur facts, and a greyhound unafraid of ceiling fans, and a grandmother in Annapolis on a video call every morning. There would be pasta on Sundays, and coffee finished to the bottom of the cup, and the word okay accumulating meaning every time it was spoken between them. There would be Emma, extraordinary and inevitable, who had known from the moment she laid eyes on Victoria that this was the correct state of things, and who had negotiated official sleeping arrangements for the dog before anyone else had thought to ask. Ryan Whitmore had spent 3 years becoming an expert at surviving. He had done it with discipline and love and the quiet stubbornness of a man who refused to stop showing up even when showing up cost everything he had. He had survived. And then, through an open door and a Vermont photograph and a woman who saw him completely, he had done something harder and braver and infinitely more worth it. He had come back to life, not all at once, not dramatically. The way real things happen slowly, honestly, in small moments that accumulated into something whole. And in that kitchen on that night with the ring on her hand and the house full of the right kind of quiet, Ryan understood something he would carry for the rest of his life. The greatest mission he had ever been given was not the one with a rank attached to it. It was this. Exactly this. The table. The coffee. The woman. The child down the hall dreaming about oceans under ice. He had served his country with everything he had. Now he was finally fully without reservation home.